Very much for staying with SABC News. You're watching SA Today with me, Flo Ledwaba. Well, the Minister of Mineral Resources, Gwede Mantashe, has come out strongly in support of the energy company Shell's plans to explore for oil and gas on the Wild Coast in the Eastern Cape. The move is being opposed by environmental groups who last week lost an urgent application to block Shell from proceeding with a seismic survey off the Eastern Cape coast. Mantashe yesterday addressed a media briefing where he put forward the government's stance not only on the case but also on all other attendant issues. Now, let's discuss this further then. We're joined via Zoom by Pooven Moodley, who's the Executive Director of Natural Justice. Mr. Moodley, thanks for joining us here on SABC News, sir.
Thank you, Flo. Good to be on.
You know, the Energy Minister has suggested that attacks on Shell and other oil and gas developers as well as opposition is to exacerbate poverty and unemployment in South Africa. What do you make of this sort of defense by the minister?
It's really disappointing to think that, ministers are voted by citizens in this country, and ministers are meant to represent, the interests of citizens, not the interests of oil and gas and mining companies. Last weekend, I was in Kolobeni, and that's one community where, the minister has been putting a lot of pressure together with the Australian mining company, to dig up the beaches and mine in the Wild Coast. And, the community there, they don't want to be mine workers. I think we've had generations and generations of mine workers that continue to live in poverty. I think people want to decide for themselves, and like the court in that case that they took through the court system, for them to have their own choice, but also that people be consulted, that people, these types of initiatives are not forced onto people. So I think, it's really disappointing, that the minister continues to try and push these projects when, it is going to cause a lot of destruction and damage. But also that, in terms of jobs, like in the segment earlier where the young girl was talking about coding, we really need to move ahead into the future where, we're not destroying our country, our planet, but rather we're giving children the opportunity, not going back to old technology.
Yeah, the minister did make an interesting point though, and perhaps it is, a good point. He raised the fact that at least 12 other seismic surveys have already actually been conducted, I think he said in the last 5 years. And then one then wonders why so much opposition to this particular exploration. And maybe while you're answering that question, maybe then talk to us and explain to us what really this exploration activity really means and what it means for marine life and the people that live close there, who I understand fish there and live that life, that life where they are in fact eating from the sea and in fact make a living from the sea. So maybe if you can just answer that two-pronged question for me, please, Mr. Moodley.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, the fact that the minister is talking about 12 seismic surveys and the impact that's already had, adds to the case. And, the communities are going back to court on the 17th. And what they will do is take forward the evidence of the harm, to not just the ocean ecosystem, where there will be massive harm and devastation, like there already has been, in the last 12 surveys. And what it actually does is, damage in terms of patterns of how, marine life, whether it's whales, dolphins, plankton, that's in the ocean bed. The evidence will show what damage there has been and what damage there will be. And these, types of damage will take a long time, if ever, to revitalize itself. Yeah. But the communities living along the ocean, they've been living sustainably, especially small-scale fishers, indigenous communities. They've been living very sustainably. But what this will do is, ensure that whole ecosystem is messed up. And, in terms of their livelihoods, in terms of their spiritual connection to the land and to the ocean, etc., it puts all of that into massive jeopardy. But also, I think the one thing the minister hasn't mentioned anything in his press statement was the fact that we're in a climate crisis on the planet. The president was at Glasgow recently, amongst other presidents, talking about what a state our planet is in now and how quickly we need to transition to renewable energy. And he's, was leading some of the process to sign some of the deals to get funding for renewables, which, is there now. So it's really hard to understand how, our minister keeps pushing, coal, oil and gas, when in fact, we should be using that money, because many of these projects will only come on stream, maybe 5 or 6 years from now, when the planet would be in a much, worse position.
Yeah, and I mean, what do you make of the government's stance? I mean, is it a case of a failure to understand the impact, as you mentioned, on the ecosystem, that it would mess up these communities and in the long run those ecosystems, but also or are you of the view that government doesn't care, and it's a case of, look, we're putting profits ahead of everything else? What is your view, that there's a lack of understanding, or that it's simply just a case of we don't care?
Flo, I really think it's a case of we don't care, in the sense that money is driving the agenda at the moment, and we've seen that time and time again. If you look at any of the mining, towns, if you look at Marikana and so on, people are left in abject poverty. The rivers are polluted, and people are living in a very unhealthy environment. The minister referred to Section 24 of the Constitution, where people have a right to a healthy environment. And it's very clear, based on what's going on, that, if you look at all our beaches that are being dug up, even on the west coast of South Africa, all of the mining, and now the continued push for fracking, and now this massive oil and gas, not just with Shell, on the East Coast, there's Sasol, there's Eni, the Italian company, all of these companies. And ultimately, what happens is these profits get sucked out, these resources get sucked out. And it's not people that from South Africa that benefit from this. These are multinational companies that take the money, away and out of the country. And that's who benefits. And that speaks to the high levels of inequality, in the country. And there are other options. So, if we move to renewables and communities have a stake and ownership in these renewables, etc., that's where jobs are going to come from. And that's where communities, that will start bridging that kind of inequality gap.
All right. Thanks very much for giving us your input. And certainly a story we'll be staying on here at SABC News. So certainly we'll require your input further. Thanks a lot for that.
Thank you.
All right, that is Pooven Moodley from Natural Justice, and of course they're opposing Shell's plans in the Eastern Cape on the coast there. All right, well, the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has told the US-hosted virtual summit on democracy that he is deeply worried about the risks facing society